Hey, do you want to play some Risk? Hello noble ones and welcome to Metatron's Academy. So today I found a video that I would like to review with you. This video was recorded exactly in the 1940s and it features an interview with a former Confederate veteran by the name of Julius Franklin Howell. Now, I'll tell you more about him, I'll give you all the context, but the reason why I put the title that I did, and I swear it's not clickbait, I have to beep a few of the words that he uses. Why is that? Here's the thing. The video is from the 1940s. The guy is from the 1840s. Yes, he was over 100 years old when he made this recording. And of course, over almost 2 centuries of distance from when he was born and from when we live now, certain words have changed. And the acceptance of those words and their position within a social dynamics from a linguistic perspective has shifted dramatically. Now, I don't want to speak too much now. I kind of want to give him the floor. We'll listen to him uninterrupted for about a minute. Then I'll pause and I'll begin some reflections because today I want to review some of the vocabulary that he's using and discuss the phenomenon from a linguistic perspective. Why do some words become offensive over time? Let's go.
I was born on the 17th day of January, 1846. I go back as far as way along the early 50s. My first recollection of public living, and especially political living, as I may call it, was when I learned as a boy of 9 or 10 that my home was in the state of Virginia. I didn't know about states before that time. Then time passed pretty rapidly because I was attending high school, and I remember distinctly the occasion when John Brown, the poor man, sought freedom for the slaves. He's there in my state. I heard about it pretty distinctly. I felt sorry, and yet sympathizing with my elders, I felt some resentment.
Okay, so we are 1 minute in. He still hasn't used any of the words. Although then again, I mean, these days, even the word slave is starting to become a little problematic. And again, whether you agree with the shifting of some words within the social space or not, that's your opinion, and I respect that, whatever that may be. It's interesting to see that it is a linguistic phenomenon that does happen. So let's begin with some information on the man that we are listening to before we continue. So we are currently listening to, as we said, Julius Franklin Howell, and we can see there is a whole page. I'll put a link in the description if you want to read more. As he himself told us, this all checks out because again, the guy is over 100 years old. So this is when he was born, 1846, in the state of Virginia. But the interesting part is his involvement with the military, because due to the fact of the era that we are talking about, this becomes quite interesting. So we are told that Julius Franklin Howell, 24th Virginia Cavalry Company K. Howell, was born January 17th, 1846. He enlisted at the age of 15. Now this actually may be wrong if we are to believe what he tells us in the interview, as you'll see. So pencil this one in the Confederate Army. He served as a courier of the Staff of General blah blah blah. He was captured 3 days before the surrender at Appomattox. I don't know if I'm reading it right. Spent 3 months at a Union prison, and he was discharged as a corporal at Fort Monroe. So I believe this was his actual military title. And for those who don't know, a corporal would be a low-ranking, non-commissioned officer in the armed forces, and says in particular in the U.S. Army, an NCO ranking above private first class and below sergeant. And apparently there is a difference if we are dealing with the U.S. Marine Corps, which we're not. Okay, let's continue.
Now, while some in my section, Southeast Virginia, I knew of some brutality, as I call it, exercised toward some of the slaves, as a whole, they got along very well. Now, my father's, why I associated with them, that being the baby of the family, I didn't have any white children for associates. Therefore, I played around with children. 4 years passed by. Then came up the great struggle when the Republican Party had become a power in the land. In 1860, Mr. Lincoln was elected, as you know. And I remember that there was a good deal of excitement in my section, that the slavery would be interfered with, should be set free and all that. Well, I didn't feel much interest about it because I felt kindly toward the Dockers, and they were kindly toward me and toward my family. Now, I was attending school, as I said, and when in the spring...
Okay, so now we move into the other section. So this was the section where you could tell I had to censor quite a lot of words because unfortunately, even though it's not guaranteed that it would cause me some trouble, but I don't want to risk the channel, if you know what I mean, or getting the video demonetized or anything like that. I would like to now jump into how certain words become offensive and even unspeakable in certain contexts and in certain languages, and how this is not a one-to-one with every language. I'll give you more details on this last one later. But the only one opinion that I wanted to share with you before we jump into the linguistic analysis and the history of linguistics is to say this. Whatever we think of the word that he's using now, in our day and age, the way he was using it was not racist or derogatory in any way, shape, or form, because we could see through the context and the rest of the words that if anything, he appears to be quite open-minded compared to other people. Hello, what you looking at? As you know, we have created a Metatron plushie for all of our fans and supporters, and we are really trying to hit 200 sales. We are 79% funded, and we have to hit 200 to be able to ensure the production. If you watching this right now were to get a plushie, we would hit 160, and then we would only be 40 short of ensuring production. If you like my content, please consider supporting me by getting a plushie today. Thank you so much. Also, I would like to add that I'm not even sure that the subtitles are picking it up correctly. Sometimes it does sound like he says the N-E-G-R-O, but other times it sounds like he's using the N-word. Once again, to be contextualized in the period, of course. Now, the linguistic phenomenon that I'm trying to discuss here is often referred to as pejoration or semantic drift due to social re-evaluation. Essentially, words that were once neutral or acceptable and even formal can become offensive over time to a given population cluster or a subgroup of that population cluster due to what are called shifts in societal attitudes and historical context. And the reason why I think this is a fascinating topic is because it sits at that intersection between linguistics, sociology, and cultural history. The word that he's using in this context, N-E-G-R-O, was once a standard formal term in English, used even by civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., just to give an example. However, the historical context is important in this case to try and understand the way he is using it, because remember, intent before the word in isolation is the real way by which we should judge any sort of vocabulary that is used whenever the conditions thereof are in fact ambiguous, and we don't know for sure that these words are being used as a pejorative or insulting term. The word which we'll refer to as N secondary word is generally frowned upon and mostly unused today. There are some exceptions within historiography, particularly because there are, for example, specific entities that do have that name, legal entities. And if you're speaking about leagues or groups or associations that do contain the word in their name, then it's absolutely fine to use it because you're reading the name of the legal entity in question. But in general, the word today is not used to describe people of Black African ancestry. However, when was this recorded? In the 1940s. Well, it's interesting because the decline of usage of this word as an acceptable word within the frame of ethnic discussion started going down in the 60s, and it became almost entirely out of use by the 1980s. But in 1947, it was still wide in usage, in all sorts of contexts. Let's listen to him for another 60 seconds, and then I'll tell you the reasons why such change occurs in different linguistic contexts.
Spring of 61, when news came that war was actually declared. In fact, it had been coming when South Carolina, as we heard, seceded from the Union. Well, wonder now what Mr. Lincoln will do when he is seated on the presidential chair. Well, there was a variety of feeling about it, even among our 75 or 100 young men, boys, at school. But right at once, when war was declared, about half of our pupils, young men over 18, quit school, joined companies of infantry, cavalry, and in their homes, in surrounding counties, and in that vicinity. I wanted to go too, but my father said, "Now, son, you're too young." I was just 15, just a little past. And if the war continues long enough, you may have an opportunity. Well, so I rested, and the war began, and I heard about it.
Okay, so in this is the section that I was saying, if he remembers correctly and the person writing the article got it wrong, then when he was 15, he wanted to join, but it doesn't seem like he was allowed to by his father, and perhaps he joined later. But then again, if you know this history better and you want to tell me, no, they're correct, he actually did go at 15 just later in the year, then do let me know in the comments. A couple of things when it comes to his pronunciation before we jump into that linguistic analysis that I was telling you and continuing the discussion. First of all, it's interesting how his accent sounds quite mixed in the sense that it's old school, as we have noted many times on this channel already with the latest videos that we have reviewed. It's non-rhotic, it's dropping R's, like the way he says chair instead of chair. Yet, the way he pronounces the I sounds quite southern, in the sense that he says Carolina instead of Carolina. There's no I, there is a A. So it's an elongated sound rather than a full diphthong, as it is in, I think, the majority of American English accents, with the exception being down south, where the I turned into a A is still the favored pronunciation. Maybe with the youth it's a little different, but still, you know what I mean. Also interesting how all his W's are highly aspirated. Why, when. This is still prevalent in some regions. On to the linguistic section again. In linguistics, pejoration refers to the process by which words acquire more negative meanings over time. This is part of what is called semantic drift, a natural linguistic process. But in the case of socially sensitive terms, the process can be accelerated by specific parties within a social sphere. Regardless of whatever reason, it be personal sensitivities or political positionings, according to politeness theory, written by Brown and Levinson, language often serves to protect social face or public self-image, and as societal norms change, some terms which once were actually neutral can start to become threatening to the face of individual or groups, prompting a shift. Another aspect of this is the euphemism treadmill, and Steven Pinker coined the term, meaning that new polite terms are coined to replace old terms that have now become pejorative. However, this can become a bit of a redundant process, because over time, these too acquire negative connotation. An example would be the word crippled, which eventually was replaced by the more polite disabled. But even that became offensive and was replaced by differently abled, then person with a disability, and probably it will continue. Now, I do have a personal example of this happening to me, but at this time, it wasn't necessarily because of a misunderstanding of mine, but due to a linguistic barrier. So a few years ago, on a few of my videos when I was focusing mostly on East Asian history and culture with some linguistics involved in it, I used the term Oriental. Now, I personally don't think there should be anything wrong with using that term, but I've learned that within the Anglosphere, at least to some people, the term has acquired pejorative connotations and has been used in some racist instances. This, even to this day, still remains extremely bizarre to me, in the sense that in my language, Italian, but I think I can speak for all Romance languages, whether it be Spanish, French, Portuguese, the word exists, in my case, orientale, and it has zero negative connotations. If anything, it's a word charged with positive exotic vibes. So I was actually quite surprised when I was told that in English the word is frowned upon in some circles. Anyways, I don't mean to offend anyone, so I stopped using it. But to the people that were particularly nasty at me, Yeah, I think they need to reevaluate themselves a little bit since, of course, as someone who has learned 2 Asian languages, studied their history, and lived in Asia for 4 years, obviously, even a cursory glance at the context would have revealed that clearly I had no ill intentions whatsoever, which once again kind of leads back to what I was saying. Intent and the true heart of a person still should be our most important signifier. Back to the gentleman.
And I heard that at the Battle of Williamsburg, some of my classmates fell in the battle there. Well, I grieved about that because they were boys that I'd been brought up with. They were a little older than I, but I felt sorry that they were killed. Then, in '62, although General Lee had still a pretty good army, he began to need more men, naturally. Although the big battles, or the largest battles, had not come yet. But my neighbors around there, some of them who were over 45, kinsmen of mine, some of them, began to just get up a company of cavalry. And I, a boy of 16 and a half years old, joined the cavalry company, which afterwards was attached and counted.
I'm so fascinated by the way he pronounced the short "a," as he says cavalry. Yeah, that's really old school, isn't it? Cavalry. He already has flapping. The T's are pronounced as soft D's, which kind of makes it distinctively American, but his vowel sounds quite English. Plus he drops the R's, so it makes it kind of East Coast. But at the same time, he has the I without the diphthong. Man, it's such a mixture. What do you think of his accent? I'm fascinated by it.
With others among the 24th Virginia Cavalry. Now, for a long time then, from August '62 on, until '64, great battles had been fought in there. We heard of the Battle of Gettysburg. And finally, our camp company was taken away from the Blackwater border, guarding this.
I do need to stop this one just to show you one thing that is interesting. I believe the subtitles are picking this incorrectly, because when he says corps, this should be spelled C-O-R-P, because he's clearly talking about a troop, like it's a military term. In fact, even his position of corporal comes from a similar stem, which is corporalis in Latin, which comes from corpus, which means body, so a body of troops. Clearly that would be the interpretation. Interestingly enough, that word in Italian from Latin has turned into caporale, and I believe we changed, not corporale as you would expect, and so we kind of lost the original stem to the word body and instead switched it for another stem, capo, which is a way to say head, probably because, you know, it's a leader or an officer. It's an interesting development. I don't think that happened in French, though, but you'll let me know. I think it maintained the same original stem in connection to Latin. This will be corps, but I'm also fascinated that the C-O-R-P, which shouldn't be corp, it's corps. It's interesting that already, for someone in his age, that pronunciation, which doesn't really reflect the spelling, is already a thing. And some of these are relatively recent, like the way you spell debt as D-E-B-T in English. It's quite recent, and they did it, Anglophone sphere changed it, just to reconnect to the Latin roots. But the original spelling was D-E-T-T-E, because it was coming from French. And that's why you don't pronounce the B in there, because it wasn't present when the pronunciation locked into the way it is today. A little bit of pronunciation as well.
Was taken away from the Blackwater border, guarding that section of the country from the incursions of federal soldiers who might cross the Blackwater River and the Chuan and come over into Confederate territory. We were taken in the spring of '64, our regiment was, in the neighborhood of Petersburg. And while we were camped just north of Petersburg, General Grant began his invasion of that part.
Man, the whole situation with General Grant, I know that Vlogging Through History is a channel that is very much into the American Civil War and even the War of Independence and whatnot. So definitely a channel I would strongly suggest to check out. Anyways, this is what I wanted to discuss today, a little bit of a shorter video, but do click the link in the description and link provided in the pinned comment to go and watch the rest of the video, which was provided to us today by the channel Alexander McRae. Thank you very much. Here's a like for you, and thank you as always, number ones, for joining Metatron's Academy. Bye.